Alright. Sounds of the Dolphin. No, The Way of the Dolphin. Medwin Goodall, 1992. Been listening to it since the mid-90s. Great emotional management states it bring about. It helps you manage your emotional state a little bit. That it brings about. Why can't I talk properly? Anyway, something I would like to share with people is the question of stubbornness. I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. If you read some of the literature on Asperger syndrome, you'll come across at some point the notion that people with Asperger's, there's no adjective for Asperger syndrome for some reason. There's a nickname, but these clever psychiatrists didn't give it an adjective describing words. So, like Aspergerish, for instance, the stubbornness. We're accused of being stubborn. We're accused of bottling things up, of not moving on, not expressing, not opening up, which may or may not be true, but then lots of people are like that anyway, aren't they? A lot of people are closed, particularly in British culture. We're not very good at saying what we feel, or saying what's on our mind, and sharing. And some of us are also not very good if we're of a more narcissistic persuasion, malignant narcissistic persuasion, of believing in anything important and having any conviction about anything, and instead, as in the case of my father, who would complain about nobody understanding anything in his job as a community psychiatric nurse, and nobody knowing what they're doing, and feels like the old elephant who's been pushed out of the herd, his exact words, and is underappreciated, and he goes the extra mile but nobody appreciates it. He gives that impression, and then he'll say something completely contradictory like, well, but at least they try their best, or, well, I guess everybody tries their best and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's cognitive dissonance. It's a lot of things with meaning, and then the opposite statement said with meaning, as if with meaning, which is very confusing when you're rooting for that person, when you actually think a lot of them in some ways, or you wish you could, in spite of other times earlier when you've really felt these people have cast me out already, or there's nothing for me here, and maybe it's more shame and guilt, but I used to feel like getting away from it all, getting away from everything I knew, starting afresh, and I still feel like that now. That is the nature of my life, starting afresh, moving on. Exile, but hopefully productive exile. I would hate to live a life which didn't have purpose or meaning, where I really did let everything slip away. Relationship, not necessarily important. I've never had a relationship. 35 years old. Had friendships, different friends of different types. A little bit ironic friendships, either creative but not interested in anything else, other side of the tracks. Most friends not creative at all, particularly not interested in literature. Some not even particularly academic, and maybe a sense of humour, but no, it's never birds of a feather flock together in the obvious intellectual sense, and that's an uncomfortable thing, isn't it, when your intellect differs from your friends, or it can be an awkward thing to broach. And if you're persuaded that you need to soul search, well, why are you soul searching? You think they're soul searching, or they're just getting on with it, as people like to put it, way too much. Or in the case of my dad, who tried to din into me that you need to maintain all your friendships because being a friend is such an ideal thing, and can never be any better than having friends, or any worse than not having friends, which is nonsense, or it's misleading, because you have to have self-belief primarily. Self-belief, conviction, believe in something as well about what it is you're here to do. Why I think that people are going to like me, when you I don't know, when you take the line of least resistance, or when you reject the line of least resistance, you are going to meet greater resistance, you're going to meet opposition. Doesn't mean that it opposes you. Why should anything oppose you? Why do you have to feel bad about it? It's not rational, is it? It's rational that you understood somebody was not being fair with you, but it's not rational that you should have to react to it. Confusing, because social discourse does involve emotion. When we communicate verbally, it does involve emotion. But this idea that you can always just ask calmly the things that you want from somebody, and say what you don't like that a person is saying or doing, seems a fallacy, or it seems difficult. I have resilience. I'm a very resilient person. Good positive affirmation, that. I have all the resilience I need to succeed, to achieve what I want to achieve, to do what I want to do with my life, because I have the right to live a happy and fulfilling life. Who doesn't? And to live my life on my own terms is the Spartan Life Coach. A line on that. I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but not very good for when you're on a YouTube channel, is it? Yes, because I want to do something to make society more pleasant. I want to get rid of this intergenerational trauma thing, or intergenerational violence, as certain people in the men's rights movement put it, or men's refuge, because there are no men's refuges is another thing. I mean, violence is not something that's affected me. Separation from parents is not something that's really affected me. Personally, I've seen enough of my parents. Emotional manipulation, struggling to comprehend who I am and feel good about that has affected me. So I say, why I think people wouldn't give me the rough end of the stick, I don't know. You have to believe in something, don't you? Conviction. The projection and denial of a parent who just moans about their job when it's actually a good job. Yes, frustrating at times, but why should that ever get you down? Seriously. Someone like that could never live like I do. They could never live alone, because they haven't really got enough self-love, self-respect. By some irony, I guess I have more self-respect. I have something wrong, a little bit dysregulated with my emotions, maybe the wrong thoughts in my head about some things. But I also have quite a high IQ, and I'm very switched on about what people do to me, what people do to each other. That's why it affects me more. But it's a projection by the parent, suggesting that you haven't got purpose, you haven't got conviction. They haven't got purpose, they haven't got conviction. They don't know what the effing hell they're doing with their life, because all they're addicted to socially is the mundane bullying, and their belief, their completely misguided belief that the peculiar notion that they are here to shape somebody's life who is actually more qualified than them academically, or has been since the age of 16, to do their job.